let's let the healing begin.
Hey girl, hey, it's your girl Gracesandra, and we are back for episode 2 of the Aging Gracefully podcast. So today I just want to jump right in to talk about perimenopause. It's something that is not as talked about as menopause. I've brought it up in a few different places now and had people be like, oh, what's that? Or like, what does that entail? And how is that different from menopause? And if you're like me, you weren't really prepared for it because it's just not really discussed. Like, just really not discussed. Tell me if I'm wrong. Tell me in the show notes or in the comment section of my YouTube channel if you feel like you've had adequate preparation for this stage of life, because I just really don't feel like we do. So for those of you who are a little bit newer on this journey, or maybe you're 36, 38 and you're like, oh, what's about to happen? So the average age for perimenopause apparently is 44, although of course it does happen with some women younger. I wrote something on Facebook a couple weeks ago about it, and someone wrote, yeah, I started perimenopause at 34, and I was like, I'm so sorry. And then I have a friend who wrote, I had 12 to 14 years of perimenopause before I actually started menopause. And I was like, sis, I'm so sorry that that's the case. Like, that is not fair to you. It is not fair for womanhood that we gotta suffer like this, y'all, that we gotta suffer. So perimenopause is not your period stopping completely. That's actually menopause. Perimenopause is just a big, long, drum up thing before the thing. It's just hard for me to believe that we got to go through all of the shit of having a period starting at maybe 12 years old. And then go through a separate second phase of shit just to lead up to us stopping the period. It just does not seem fair, y'all. It just don't seem fair. So I have a few fast facts on perimenopause. Your period can become lighter, heavier, shorter, more prolonged, or associated with more severe PMS, or if you have what I have, more severe PMDD. PMDD stands for predysphoric premenstrual disorder, which is basically severe anxiety, severe depression, severe mood swings, severe irritability. Y'all, it's terrible. It's literally terrible. And I've had PMDD since, I would say, my early 30s. I noticed PMDD, but really, when I realized I'm in perimenopause, my PMDD, these mood swings around the period have been insane. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit more in a few. During this part of our femininely cycles, our eggs become more resistant to ovulation, which is great, right? So we're not worried about pregnancy as much, hopefully, though we can still get pregnant, so please use your birth control. But what happens is our estrogen and our progesterone. How do you say that? Progesterone or progesterone? I think it's progesterone. I don't know. I'm just going to say progesterone. I'm just going to say it like that. But basically they decrease. And that means that's all these rapid changes in our cycle, which means we get these hormonal spikes. And for some of us, it looks like more obnoxious symptoms. And for some of us, it's not as heightened. But if you feel like you have these symptoms, you could be in perimenopause, sis. So problems you can see and feel, some of them are hot flashes, irritability, insomnia, sleep deprivation, forgetfulness, vaginal dryness. Possible unseen problems are cardiovascular disease and osteoporosis, things that are just happening behind the scenes that you just got to be careful for. So in today's episode, I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the things that I've been experiencing, some of the ways that we can continue to have this conversation to just decrease shame around what happens in the woman's body just in general, and some of the things that we can do to help treat it. This is a huge topic. I mean, honestly, when I was sitting down to write down what I wanted to do for this whole first season, we could do 12 episodes just on perimenopause. So I'm really just brushing over it, but I wanted to start here because it's such a big problem in my life right now. So this is in some ways like selfish, because I want to continue this conversation around something that I just didn't feel prepared for, the strength of it coming on. So the first question I have for you is, did y'all feel adequately prepared for this? So I'm thinking about, your mom, your grandma. Did anybody talk about perimenopause, not just menopause? And did anybody talk about it with you? Or was it something that you just picked up on TV, in the movies, like, oh, here's this thing that happens, a women's period just stopped? Or did you think like I did for most of your adult life, like, oh, just one day my period's gonna stop and that's gonna mean I'm old, without any thought or ideas of what might might happen before that happens. Because the truth is, menopause is not an isolated event. And in fact, menopause happens, sis, listen to this, before you're born. Yes, before you're born. I'm reading directly from a book. I will put the book in the show notes. But the book says menopause actually begins prior to birth. Within the ovary, there is a complex system whereby eggs mature, then wither and die. This process occurs on a consistent basis, totally independent of our menstrual cycle. And in fact, this process even continues in spite of pregnancy or birth control. So basically, it goes on to say that when you're conceived, when you're a little zygote thing in your mama's thing, very scientific language, I know. But basically, when you're a baby in your mother's womb, when you're still in the womb, you have 5 to 6 million eggs. By the time you're born, that's already dropped from 1 to 2 million. So literally in the womb, you losing eggs. By the time you hit puberty, your average egg population is down to around 300,000. That's all the eggs you got to work with for your childbearing years, essentially. And then during the next 35 years to 40 years of your reproductive life, while you out here getting knocked up, having babies, potentially having miscarriages, etc., the numbers continue to decline at a constant rate. And then it accelerates slightly 10 to 15 years prior to menopause. But by the time your periods end, completely stop, and that means a whole year has went by, that's the end of menopause, you only have a few hundred left. And so this process basically is happening over decades, and all we ever hear, let me know if you heard differently, all I ever heard was, bam, one day your eggs stop dropping down, you can't get pregnant anymore, and then your menopause is on. And so there just hasn't been enough talk about perimenopause. And it made me wonder, what is the place to do that? So for example, my mom, when she was in menopause, when she was in perimenopause, I remember distinctly the hot flashes. I never talked about it with her, but I remember my mother getting really red. She's white Italian, and I could see it in her skin. When we'd be driving to school, and all of a sudden she would have the windows open, and I was like, what are you doing? Like, it's winter. And she'd be like, I'm hot. And look at her. And I could see like red splotches all over her. I remember distinctly the phase where she was opening up windows in the winter. I have done that now. And I have had times where my kids have been like, what are you doing? Like, it's literally cold in here and you still have the windows open. And I've just been like, y'all, I'm hot. Y'all just got to deal with it. So I remember that part of my mom's life, but she never, at that point, I think it was in junior high or high school when she was taking me to school. What would have been the point of her saying, she could have, but it would have felt really obnoxious if she had said like, oh, hey, by the way, in several decades, maybe after you have all your children, you're going to experience what I'm experiencing now. And I thought about that because I have a daughter who's 6.5 right now. So we haven't even barely touched the surface of what's going to happen in her body as she hits puberty and starting a period. So obviously I'm not going to talk to her about perimenopause right now. But when is the time? Do I talk to her about it in junior high? Do I wait till high school? I don't know if I'll be around. Hopefully I will be. Lord willing, I will be around when she's, 45 years old. But when she's 45 years old, I'll be in my 80s. I think, because I had her at 40, right? So 40 plus 45 would be 85, right? So it's just like, it's just this weird thing where unless you're in this, in our Western individualized society, it just doesn't make as much sense when you think about these life stage things, because ideally I would have, my mom is gone now, but ideally I would have my mom around to be like, yeah, this is what I went through. My mother was mentally ill and she had schizophrenia, and then she died with dementia. So that conversation wouldn't have happened anyway. But in a perfect world, a woman at my age, at 46, would still be surrounded by a community of people to be like, hey, of women in our lives at every life stage, like you might start experiencing these things as a lead up to menopause, and just, kind of get your mind around it. Just wrap your mind around it. But I don't think any of us are experiencing that kind of community. Again, tell me if I'm wrong. But I also wanted to raise this point so that we could consider being that community for people, other women in our lives as we come up, because I've been writing about it on Facebook. I shared a lot on my Instagram stories as well. So if you're not following me on Instagram, definitely follow me there because I share a lot of personal stories. But I've had more and more women be like, yeah, I think I might be in it, or I'm getting ready to be, in my early 40s. And so I'm going to start thinking about this and reading about this. Like, thank you for bringing this up because I haven't thought about it before. And it just made me think, like, if you have other women in your life who are on the come up, they're 38, 40, 42, 44, this is a great discussion to have, especially if it's something that you're like currently experiencing. Like, hey, there's this thing you should know about, and it's called perimenopause, boo. Like, buckle up, buttercup, because Lord, here it comes. Okay, so let's talk about what's surprising me. There's a few things surprising me personally about perimenopause in terms of how this journey is really hitting me. I feel like it's been slowly coming on, and the first way that it's come on, the intensity of the mood swings, it hasn't just felt like regular schmegular premenstrual dysphoric disorder, my regular schmegular PMDD that I mentioned I've had since my early 30s. It's felt like PMDD even on crack. Like PMDD done went and lost her damn mind. It's just been like so next level. So I want to share with y'all kind of a personal story that happened to me recently as a result of these just insane hormonal spikes and drops and spikes and drops, and just wild in ways that are really surprising to me, even as someone who has previously struggled with depressive episodes. It's been intense even for me. And that's saying something, y'all. That's saying something, because I previously have struggled with suicidal ideations. I have a history of childhood trauma and a history of depressive episodes, and honestly a history of suicidal ideations. But there is something that's happened since perimenopause came that is bigger and scarier and made me realize I have to get a handle on this. I need help and I need to do something differently. So it's been about 3 months or so that I realized I am definitely in perimenopause, and it's really hitting me hard. The first giveaway for me for that was the periods. It's probably been 3 months, maybe 4 months that I've had double periods a month. Double periods, y'all. Double. That shit is not cute. That is not cute in any way, shape, or form. I'm like, yeah, this, not to mention, like really messes up your sex life, especially because another thing about perimenopause is increased sex drive. It could be increased or decreased, but for me, honey, it's increased. But anyway, so that's how I really knew I'm really in this, because I have not been like officially tested. There is a test you can get for perimenopause, but I'm not officially tested, but I know I'm in it. I have all the symptoms. But let me tell y'all a story that happened. So just recently, I have been going through some struggles financially that have caused a lot of stress. I will say that. And I think that has added to the level of stress and added to the depressive episodes. But knowing that I'm in perimenopause and seeing how I've had these mood swings go up and down so intensely around my period or when I'm on my period, one of the ways it's changed is before with PMDD, it was just like those 3 to 10 days out. Especially the day before, PMDD looked like, okay, the day before, I'm very severely depressed and I just really don't want to be spoken to. I'm just depressed, leave me alone. And then my period would come, and then it would be like, okay, I've evened out. But with PMDD, what has happened is it could be the day before, but it could be the next day. It could be the second day of my period. It could be the third day. It could be the second to last day. It could be the day after my period, and anything in that whole time frame, the perimenopause has made it a literal period of time that is not emotionally healthy for me. So last month in March, I think it was a day or two before my period, and I could feel it coming on. So I could feel the sadness coming on, but I didn't know. It's been very impossible to track my period because of how intense. It's become really impossible to track my period because it hasn't been regular at all. The only thing I know is it's about every 2 weeks, but it could be a spotting for a day or two and then stop, then 3 days, then stop, then 7 days, then 10 days without anything. I mean, it's just been really very hard to track, basically is what I'm saying. So I think it was like a day or two, and I was like, this is a day or two of feeling a different kind of heavy. Maybe my period's going to start, but I wasn't sure. And then one day it just hit me like a ton of bricks, and I plummeted and had like a very severe depressive episode. And I was trying to fight it all day. I went out, I was doing Shipt. I went out because I drive for Shipt sometimes, which is grocery delivery. So I went out to do my shift, and I'm out there and I could feel it just hitting me. Like every time so I did like 3 or 4 shops, and in between every time I would just sit in the car and I was bawling my eyes out. Yeah, this was like 3 weeks ago, 2 or 3 weeks ago. So I'm bawling my eyes out, and then like halfway through the day, one of my girls texts me and she's like, hey, how are you? I'm just checking in on you. And so I decided to leave her back a voice clip. And when I left her back a voice clip, it was like all of the emotion just poured out, and I'm bawling my eyes out. I'm telling her how horrible I feel, how everything is terrible, and how much pressure I'm under financially, and how sad I feel, and how I feel worthless. And I'm going on and on and on. And then by the end of the voice clip, I think it was like a 7 or 8 minute voice clip, I was like, you know what? I'm going to call the National Suicide Hotline, because I realized I had been fighting wanting to die the whole day. And there was a point that particular day, it was dark and snowy and cold. And there was a point where I was driving over a bridge, and I just thought, you should just drive off it. What difference does it make? Just drive off it. And so I sped up a little bit. And then, at the last second, I was like, what are you doing? Don't do that. And thankfully, I had the thought of like, what if your car goes over the barrier and lands on somebody else's car, and there's like a little baby in the car? Like, even in your death, you will feel awful for killing somebody else. Like, don't mess up somebody else's life. And so then it was kind of like, you're right, but I should still die, but just not that way. But I was fighting it all day. And so by the time I left that message for her, I realized I just want to do it. I'm done with this. So I get back home. I get in the driveway and I call the National Suicide Hotline, and I spoke with someone for probably like 45 minutes. And, she definitely was able to talk me down. She's definitely very skilled. I don't even remember her name, but thank you to whoever you are, sending you love and light and good vibes for keeping me alive. And it really scared me because of how long it was. I've had suicidal ideations probably, this is not an exaggeration, this is not hyperbole, I've had them probably once a month for an entire year, if not 13 or 14 months in a row. The tiny little bit of backstory to that, this isn't solely about perimenopause, but I believe I have been in perimenopause this whole time. Probably for me for almost 2 years now, and I'm 46. I've been in recovery from a very severely abusive domestic violence marriage, and which gave me complex PTSD. So our divorce finalized in 2020, and I have been on a recovery journey ever since then that has, I thought at times was doing better, and then has went, downhill. And then I had a horrible intimate partner situation happen last year that was like 3 months of high stress at the beginning of last year, and it culminated in a vicious physical and then verbal assault. And that added a layer of trauma onto last year, and I was already still recovering from the domestic violence situation in my marriage. And then my mom died in November, and I lost a job. I forgot that in July. So last year, 2022, was not a great year for me. So when I say I had a monthly suicidal ideation, I also want to share a picture of what that looks like. That has looked like 1 minute, 3 minutes, 7 minutes tops maybe, of really feeling like I can't do this. I really, really want to go. I'm ready to go. But then I noticed after my mom died in November, they got longer. So in December, I had it very briefly, but it was maybe 10 minutes. And then in January, that is when I experienced heightened financial pressure. Heightened. Because different things I thought were going to work out. I thought I was getting this really great job. I didn't end up getting it, for example. Then it was like, I don't remember, 15, 20 minutes. I don't remember. February, suicidal ideations came again. I felt more scared in February. I was like, wow, that was longer. But in March, this was 3 weeks ago, y'all, it was 6 or 7 hours. It was really, really a long time to fight it. And it's just this thing that I have thought over and over again. If I had to fight for a long time, I know there's people who fight ideations like this for days and weeks and months. And it does make me have compassion and see ultimately why people who are fighting this intense urge to end their life, why they do it. Because I've experienced the depth of that kind of emotional pressure that is just intense and horrific. March and February were both very intense. And I had a deep discussion with my therapist in February where I decided to make some really important changes in my life because of the intensity of how the ideations played out in February. But this last time was so intense. And it really scared me. It really scared me. The crazy, sad, hard thing about going through things like, our PMDD, premenstrual dysphoric disorder, or these crazy hormonal spikes, dips and spikes from perimenopause, is that it feels very real at the time. It feels very much like this is who I am. I felt very much like I really am a failure. I really am worthless. I really am just wasting space here. Like, what the fuck is the point of me being here? There really is no point. And it really feels very much like, then just go. And then when I come out of it, it feels very opposite. And that coming out of it can happen within a day. Y'all, sometimes within hours, where the next day I felt like, I'm very glad. I feel really bad for women that we have to go through this because of just how real it feels and how intense it is and how scary it is and how much we need to go, how much we have to go through just for our cycle to end. Like, it should not be this way. And there are obviously things that we can do, and I do have some solutions. Again, this is something we could talk about for a long time. So you might be like, Grace, I'm head scratching here. Like, why don't you just go on antidepressants, boo? So just FYI, I have been on antidepressants before. I mentioned last year that I lost my full-time salaried position due to a mental health crisis, and I lost my ability to have medical insurance, and then I lost my doctor and my ability to go to my doctor, and then I lost my ability to pay for antidepressants. So I weaned myself off of them in October, and unfortunately it's become very, very clear that I've desperately needed them. But I am happy to update that I have a doctor's appointment tomorrow. I am now on Medicaid, Medicare, whatever. The government is gonna help me out. Whatever it is, I'm on it so that I can get back to antidepressants because it is obvious that I need it. And I'm looking forward to them helping me, and I have no shame at all in acknowledging that I benefit from vitamin Z. That's what I call my Zoloft. I can't wait to get back on it because I have needed my mood to even out. So that is one thing that has really surprised me. And like I said, by 2 days later, I was feeling fine. So you might be wondering, okay, so what do we need to do to deal with this? I'm going to briefly go over a few things. I have not tried a lot, y'all. So this journey has, again, it's kind of new in me really realizing like, wow, I'm in this thing. Like, it's time for me to really think about and do something about this thing. Like this is a thing. This is not a small thing. So there's only a few things that I did. Like, when I first started perimenopause, the really only symptom I had was migraines, where I started getting these intense migraines, but it was taking me out of work like 2 or 3 days at a time. What I started doing for that was literally trying to rest so much more often around the time of my period, because it would be right at the beginning, right when I was already feeling hormonal and angry and anxious and all of these things. So just trying to rest more, because sleep deprivation is a big part of perimenopause. So that is just one thing that has literally been so hard on me. There's these crazy mood shifts, but there's also so many other things, and I'm just going to name a few of them. Hot flashes, which I've definitely had at night, just waking me up. People have said that the hot flashes at night, which results in restless sleep because you're always sleeping hot, which is so true for me lately. I've had a few situations with just a couple different guys that I've dated where it's actually caused so much drama. They're just at a normal temperature, like how I've been, and like they're cold when I would be cold, and just there's been a couple different situations where it's just unbearable at night. Like, if I've been at their place where I'm like, this is unbearable. Like, can you get a fan? Can we open the window? Like, your girl is in perimenopause, I'm hot. So it actually has caused issues like on the dating end as well with just that. I mean, it's only happened like a few times, but there was a guy I was seeing. We were seeing each other all of January, and I was just hot as hell at his place because we always stayed at his place. And I was like, you got to turn the fan on. Like, you got to give me something. Like, I'm literally having hot flashes here. And he would keep the heat set on hell. Like, he just was always cold. I mean, in a previous life of mine, actually that would have been a perfect arrangement because I used to always be cold. But anyway, so some other ones are memory loss. If you feel like brain fog, if you feel like your mind is moving slower, which I definitely feel, but I felt memory loss for a really long time. So some other ones that I didn't think of, but I've noticed now, is just So the coochie effects, okay? So you could be experiencing vaginal dryness, or here's a few that I didn't really know were associated with perimenopause. Having to pee more often. I've peed like 20 times today, y'all. I did not know that was a perimenopause thing. Another thing is vaginal burning, which you think maybe you're having a yeast infection, but it could be a day and then it just goes away, which has happened to me a couple times where it's just been a day. And so I actually literally went out and bought over-the-counter yeast infection stuff, and then it just was gone the next day. And then 3 weeks later, you know, it's for 3 hours. And so I'm like, oh, this is literally just perimenopause. This is not me having any yeast infections. I mean, obviously it's good to go to a doctor and check. Again, I have an appointment soon, so I will do so, but just random stuff, y'all. Feeling irritated, like seriously irritated, is another side effect or symptom of perimenopause. Increased sex drive is another one that has really surprised me. And I've kind of alluded to this because I feel like I've been sexually peaking for a long time. Probably ever since I turned 38, 39, I definitely was like, sex? Oh, like this is so much better than usual. But what I've realized since perimenopause, and this is something I saw in this book, the book I'll link here, and I don't know what page it is, so I'm not going to try to find it right now, but it basically said that one of the reasons that some women enjoy sex more during perimenopause is because usually, not all the time, your kids are older, so you're less concerned about that. You're less concerned about getting pregnant because your fertility is down because of the increased hormones. And decreased hormones at certain times of the month. Your libido is higher and it gives you heightened enjoyment. And that is something that I can say I've experienced. It's a different feeling than what an orgasm in my 40s is. Such a different orgasm in my 30s was different than in my 20s. Basically every decade the orgasms have intensified. And so I'm like, okay, perimenopause, I gotta thank you for that. This says that a lot of women experience vaginal dryness. I'm experiencing the opposite, and it might be because, again, increased libido, increased everything, increased heightened enjoyment. But it's also that's also created issues too, because I'm not in a relationship. Clearly, I'm not married, and so I have found that haven't really dated anyone where it's the situation where they are nearly wanting it as often as I am because of this. I've even had a couple people like, dang, your perimenopause, sexual drive, whatever is going on with you is doing something crazy. I'm like, yeah, I know. It really, really is. But basically, perimenopause is a time to say, like, enjoy yourself. Like, sis, enjoy yourself. You're not finna get, it's very unlikely you're finna get pregnant. I still use IUD, FYI. Still use protection, all of those things. Let's protect ourselves. But there's still very, very low risk of pregnancy, and there's just less concerns. For me, I still have a 6.5-year-old because I had a late in life baby, so I'm not quite at that stage because I have an elementary school kid, a middle school kid, and a high school kid. So I still got kids, okay? So I still have all of the concerns, and I'm a single mom, and I'm recovering from domestic violence and childhood trauma and complex PTSD. But your girl is still out here managing to find a way to enjoy sex, and so that's what I've done, even though I decided to kind of slow it down a little bit because there's other reasons maybe I'll talk about in a further episode. But in a different episode, there is just basically a ton of things that are happening in our body as a result of this. I'm going to read a few others that I got from this book. So this mentions, and I think I kind of lost my point before, but you're having these hot flashes at night, which leads to restless sleep, which leads to chronic sleep deprivation, which, as you know, can lead to memory loss and extreme fatigue, and that can lead to depression, and that can lead to feelings of worthlessness, and that can lead to suicidal ideations. And I feel like that domino, it's called the domino theory of perimenopause, is exactly part of what I've been caught on, exactly what I got caught up in addition to the financial struggles, losing a job, having a heightened sense of vulnerability because my mom died and I don't have really family that I'm close to at all, that's supportive in any way. Outside of my girlies, I got my best friends and my girlfriends. They're scattered all over the country. So there's just issues and reasons why women have these vulnerabilities at this time of life. So another one is less pelvic support, which can lead to urine loss when you're not expecting it. In addition to needing to do more Kegels, I will say that if I cough too hard, it ain't good, y'all. It ain't good. Emotional changes, the sleep deprivation, like I said, can lead to depression. I didn't go into too much detail about this before, but osteoporosis after age 40, the breakdown of our bones, bone breakdown accelerates with the loss of estrogen. And so you're just more likely to break things if you fall and stuff like that. I mean, it's like real old lady shit, y'all, for real. So there are some things we can do. So I want to just talk about just a few things we can do. One of the things that I did, there's just a couple of things that I've done so far, y'all, because again, I just realized like this is a big thing. This is a really big thing in my life, and I need to start thinking about it and taking it more seriously. So one of the things I've done is start trying to get more rest, especially leading up to a period, and just being really cognizant of my sleep schedule and protecting it. Even if that means I can't go out and have fun, even if that means I can't get the dick I want when I want it because my sex drive is so freaking crazy, but I just need to take my ass to sleep, essentially, basically. So getting more rest, and then I've started using some over-the-counter things, quote-unquote, like raspberry tea, and I will link in the show notes the raspberry tea that I'm using to help treat migraines and to help even out hormonal shifts. And then I'm going back on my antidepressants to deal with the mood stuff. So far, I don't really need to do much more. I'm already getting regular exercise. I am going to get some screening tests as I'm able. There is hormone replacement therapy. I am very hesitant to go that route, which I can talk more about later in later episodes if I do. But you are, as an older aging woman, at more risk for cardiovascular disease, and so watching our diet, eating healthier, being careful what we eat, reducing all of these high fat foods and what's the word I'm looking for? The box food. Y'all know what I'm talking about. It's a journey. It's a journey, y'all, and it's not a journey we can ignore. Perimenopause is here and it ain't going nowhere. And you're not going to be the one woman in the world who is exempt from perimenopause symptoms. So you might as well start thinking about it, start reading about it, start learning about it, figuring out what to do. I definitely have some plans in place. I am considering going vegan again. I used to be vegan several years ago, probably 5 or 6 years ago, and I never felt better. I felt really high energy. My body felt better. I lost weight. I felt good about the weight that I had lost, and that wasn't the reason I did it. I did it for a lot of reasons, but I wasn't a junk food vegan either. I was learning how to cook vegetables. I was learning how to take care of my body, and eventually I just got sick of it because I really wanted like an egg salad sandwich and deviled eggs and a tuna fish sandwich and things like that, and then it just snowballed back into like the regular sad standard American diet, essentially. But that is something I think I'm going to do as a result of perimenopause, where I was like, this is just another way I could take care of myself, because energy is a big deal for me right now. Like I said, I'm in perimenopause with 3 school-age kids as a single mom, and energy is low, honey, it's low. So that's something that I'm going to do. I'm curious to hear if you are planning on doing anything to deal with what could be perimenopause, or if you're in it. I would love to hear all of the things in my YouTube comments on this video or on Apple iTunes. If you enjoyed this podcast, please go to Apple iTunes and leave me a review. It really helps get the podcast pushed out there. And again, you can watch this on my YouTube channel at Out Here Trying to Survive. That's Tryna, Tryna. I appreciate y'all listening, tuning in, and I will see y'all on my next episode. Bye.